Thank you. And we're really fortunate this week, to have turned this into a partnership with the many Jewish congregations in our area. So Shomrei, Agudath Israel, B'nai Keshet, B'nai Shalom, Temple Near Tamid, and of course, Montclair Emergency Services for Hope, MESH, which is an agency that actually feeds people who are hungry. And we'll introduce the head of MESH in a moment. So it's wonderful to have so many people come together to hear this and participate. What I was referring to earlier is this was coalesced around a film called Hungry to Learn. It was part of the Montclair Film Festival. We were fortunate to be able to get the film. If you haven't seen the film, it will be available for another week. The link to see the film is already in the chat. So you'll hear more about the film, but I strongly recommend that if you haven't, it's an hour and a half. It will be a very well spent and probably painful hour of your life, but I do encourage you to see it. So I think with that, Dale, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us forward, and I'll monitor the chat and I'll let you do the rest of the work. Thank you, Dale. So our very own Dale Russakoff. So for those of you who don't know Dale, I talk to her like she's my good buddy, which she is. Dale is a renowned author and news reporter and all-around mensch. So Dale, now to you.
Thank you so much, Shirley, for doing this every month, sometimes more than once. You know, I want to introduce the people on the panel because we're really lucky to have people who know so much about this issue. Gwen Ames is the executive director of MESH, the Montclair Emergency Services for Hope. And this is an organization that Shomrei partners with to serve homeless families nutritious meals 6 days a week. And I think it's really striking that before the pandemic, MESH was feeding 760 meals a month, and now it's 1,000 meals a month. So in these conditions, even more families are being served by this network. And Peter Keating is the chairman of the board of the, chairman of the local community board for the United Way of Northern New Jersey, and an investigative journalist, and a superb advocate in our area for all issues dealing with poverty and the working poor. We had intended to have a student on the panel, Desmond Mitchell, who just graduated from Bloomfield College, who himself has throughout college struggled with food insecurity, and Gwen knows him well and actually recruited him, but he's sick and he's not able to appear with us, so we really miss him, and Gwen will talk about him a bit in her remarks. But I hope, just a show of hands, how many people have seen the film? Oh, that's great, because you know, because of the film, you've met 4 students who are living with food insecurity, and that's really important to understanding this issue. I just wanted to make one general comment about the film, which is it was kind of amazing how much this issue was hiding in plain sight, that these kids were going hungry. They were, you know, they were falling asleep in class. They were in pain. And it was just because they thought this was what happened when you go to college. It's so expensive. Families are so stressed already. And so they skipped meals because there was just nowhere else to get money, to save money. And it was shocking because these kids look like kids that you see every day. And it was a problem that until very recently wasn't even recognized, because we know who's on food stamps, we know about families and communities, But these kids had left home and they were in college and they were just doing what they had to do to get by. And the amount of pressure they were living with is inhumane. And this was before COVID. And this world is so much harsher now. So many more people are in crisis. So I just wanted to start by asking first Gwen and then Peter, how, I mean, I know maybe Gwen, you said you hadn't watched the film, but you live the film every day. So I was wondering from just what you know of the film, what, how this resonates with what the work you're doing and what you're seeing now among students, but also in the general population with hunger issues.
Well, certainly the virus has just changed everything. That we used to did not see very many children come to mesh, and now we see moms with their children, fathers coming with their children, and we have college students who come to us to eat. As a matter of fact, I sat with one yesterday, and he critiqued our food. He said that he was hungry for a few days, and we had sent out a flyer saying that we had this drop in where you can drop in and have a meal. And he was very reluctant to come, but he came, and we had it all set out with social distancing. And I watched him just to become relaxed and eat the food. And I had a conversation with him about it, and he talked about being a student at Montclair State and just not having the money to buy food and not wanting to go to they have a pantry also, but he didn't want to go to the pantry because he was ashamed. But so he came down to Mesh where nobody knew him, and we sat and talked. He was from down South Jersey, but he had no money to eat, and he really enjoyed the meal. I think we had chili. He really enjoyed the meal, and he was able to loosen up and talk. He said he thought he never would uh, be in a place like this, but his parents' house was gone on a foreclosure, and so there was no extra money for him. But he seemed to be at ease because he was able to talk to somebody. But at first, he was very nervous, and he didn't want to go to the food pantry up at Montclair State because he was embarrassed. And that's common. It's very common in the patrons that we're getting now, that they're coming to get a meal or coming with their children. They're embarrassed. They're ashamed to be coming. So we try to accommodate them to feel welcome.
It's a great service.
Mhm.
And as we said earlier, anyone who wants to contribute to MESH or other organizations in our area that are serving people who need food,
Yeah.
it's in the chat. So please go to those places. Peter, would you talk about how it resonated with what you do and what you've seen?
Well, on the most immediate level, as I'm sure you all know, the demand for basic food supplies is has just exploded as more people cannot provide even staples for their households. So that whenever we help fund or cooperate in a food giveaway, the lines are out the door and around the corner. I mean, you've seen this at Tony's Kitchen, you've seen it at Giant Stadium, you've seen it at Glenfield Park. And it's shocking because the first thing people will often make sure they have enough of for their households is, of course, food. At United Way, we've done a lot of research on this now. And for a while now, we've been talking about ALICE, an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. You know that the poverty line is set so low, number one, that it does not describe adequately any threshold of self-sufficiency. And number two, it's set essentially randomly. The poverty line was established by a basket of goods in the late 1960s and adjusted intermittently for inflation since then, without making allowance for how everything else in life has changed. So what we do is we look a little bit above the poverty line to the level at which people are able to meet the basic needs of a household. And it's something like twice or more of what the actual federal poverty line is. But there's that line of just taking care of basic food, housing, and transportation and other really basic costs. And our new ALICE report, which was a snapshot of data in 2018, so this is before the pandemic, showed that 37% of households are at that ALICE line or below. And there are surveys that show that students are right in line with that more than 1/3 of students have experienced food insecurity here in New Jersey in just the past month. We have found that if you look at that, there are certain groups, and they include part-time workers, older folks who don't have transportation and can often get isolated, and younger people whose experiences and lived situations are different from how we kind of perceive them from the outside, and who may be at a day-to-day level of sufficiency, but who are one financial crisis away from complete disaster because they can't save money. And typically these populations are underinsured, underfed, and underhoused. And it's shocking to think that about students, but students often leave their households, their parents or their families or wherever they're living before, and the assumption is that they'll be fine, especially because they're often paying for room and board at the schools to which they go. But it turns out, even though students are working more than ever right now, they have less cash on hand because housing costs and school costs are just so high. So, you know, the research is actually scarier than we thought it would be. The numbers are frightening, and what they kind of portend is even worse. And just one number that just blows my mind: from 2007 to 2018, the number of young people living at ALICE line or below is up 41%. So from boom time, from before the Great Recession to before the pandemic, the number was up 41%. And I don't even really want to imagine what it's going to be once we're able to fully measure the effects of the pandemic.
And Peter, you said something when we had our talk before this, that food is the last thing people are willing to sacrifice, that they'll steal money from rainy day funds, from the rent, from anything to eat. So the fact that people are not able to eat is such a reflection of a much huger economic crisis. It's not just about food, right? I mean,
Well, there's a lot of research that shows that the instinct for food is so basic. I mean, it's literal hunger, that people will do almost anything to provide it for their families. There are plenty of people who don't have adequate housing who still manage to scrape together some food. There are plenty of people who eat cereal for dinner with their families because it's cheap and somewhat nutritious. If people are experiencing food insecurity despite kind of instinctively having a lot of coping strategies for not ending up in that place, it's scary because it indicates that there's greater needs out there. Like I said, a lot of the ALICE and below population, you know, you trip down one flight of stairs and you injure an ankle, you can't get to work, you don't have good insurance. One poorly placed toy can lead to literally to financial disaster. That's, you know, and I hope hopefully we'll get into this a little bit, but because these numbers that we're talking about are pre-pandemic, it kind of shows that getting back to normal, getting back to what things were like 2 years ago, which we probably are all sitting around thinking of, would be fantastic if we could get back to just that level. But that's not good enough because it's nearly 2 out of 5 people in this state who are still not able to meet the household needs for their families.
and you know, there was a statistic in the film that there was a survey across the CUNY campuses, across all 19 campuses, and it found that this was, again, pre-pandemic, late 2019, I think. And it found that nearly half of students had gone hungry at some point in the previous month. 22% had frequently experienced hunger, and 48% in the last 30 days had had to skip a meal because of expenses. And another data point in the film was that more than 1 million students in the United States said in late 2019 that they were turning to food banks to eat. And the film also made the point that more than 600 colleges and universities had opened food banks by 2019. And this was from a couple of years ago not having them.
Right.
So it was truly an unacknowledged issue for a very long time. Now, Gwen, you're also a dean at Nyack College. Can
Yeah.
you talk to us about what you've seen among those students, and also share some of what you know about what Desmond has experienced?
Sure. Well, I am a dean at Nyack College, but I'm also pretty active at Bloomfield College because we started a partnership with them about 7 or 8 years ago because we wanted to do a fundraising with ornaments, and we got a student from there to create it. And every year we've been getting different students who are artists to create a ornament for the holiday season. And so I got to know some of those students and began to know about their hunger and about their need for housing. So Mesh decided to, well, I kind of urged them. So we would take the money from the ornament selling, and we would pay for them to stay in the dorm because they could not go home. So many of them did not have a place to go to. So we would pay for them to stay from November to after Martin Luther King Day. They would go back to school and then they'd stay again during the summer. So I got to know them really well. They would volunteer in our cafes, and we got a chance to talk about their ideas for life, really. And we had a wonderful part of it was, college to careers. We had our board members and other volunteers to come and talk about, how they struggled through college and how they made their decisions about going through college. And that was very helpful to them. And many of them really still ask about, the people who volunteer to tell them about their struggle in college. But Desmond was special. He was inquisitive about the Mesh Cafe and easy to get him to work in the cafe. Not only did he do the cafe, he also did overnight respite because he felt as if that was a way of giving back if he was helping actually in our respite services. Um, Desmond became ill just out of the blue. He became ill. His roommate found him lying on the floor in their bedroom, and they called the ambulance. And he went to 3 different hospitals in our area, and he ended up, I think, in St. Barnabas. Maybe I might be wrong about the hospital, but I know he stayed in for several months, and he coded 3 times. And we were very concerned about him and the fact that he was able to come back, recuperate and graduate, and now he has a job. But his mother said that he's having some of the same illness that he had before. She didn't really share, what that was about, but she did say that he needed his rest and that asked for us to really keep him in our prayers as he get restored again. But it was just a wonderful student. We had I remember when we would do gardens in the springtime. And some of the girls didn't want to do it because it would mess up their fingernails, but Desmond was right down in the ground, with me as we grew our vegetables. He's a wonderful, wonderful young man. I just hope that he will rise again because he certainly has had a tough time. But I'm sure he would have wanted to be here if he could. But I didn't talk to him directly. I talked to the mother. So I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to talk to him. But I've met numbers of students that we have over the 4 years that we did it. We've met a lot of students, different ethnic groups who were struggling to continue college, who, maybe their parents lived somewhere else, they lived here, and when summer came, they had no place to go. When the holiday came in the winter, they had no places to go. So I'm really proud that Mesh was able to do that. We would pay their housing, and we got Food Town in Bloomfield to give them gift cards. So we didn't want them to eat junk, so we gave them food cards, and we had a little workshop about nutrition. And so they really learned how to budget their money and how to eat well. And that has been a wonderful experience from the volunteers who we've recruited to come and talk to them. They've been very, very fortunate. And some of them have kept relationships, over the years, which is great.
And I think you told us you helped some of them get jobs,
Oh,
including
yes.
Desmond, right?
Yes, I did. We wrote a grant for the contact tracing project that Governor Murphy really spearheaded, but then he decided to really give the grant, the supervision of it from a corporation out of Massachusetts. And so that corporation kind of spread it out. But they did want to take some of the people that I have recruited. I recruited 56 persons to be a part of contact tracing. And I feel really, really good about that. And Desmond was one of them. And there are 3 other students who had graduated, and I was able to get them jobs with contact tracing. So I feel like Mesh has done something really wonderful. So he's very excited about it. So I'm hoping that he will, rise again, because he's very excited about doing that work and being able to give back. So that was a real plus for me with Desmond and others as well.
Well, I hope they'll tell him everybody here is, I mean, I can just tell looking at the faces, I can see how moved people are, and that, he has a lot of people pulling for him, and hope he'll,
Hope he'll rise again.
yes, absolutely.
Mm.
Peter, you also had a lot of thoughts about, I mean, this is such a bleak picture, what the community can do, what organizations can do to try to prepare for the challenges we've got coming as soon as, I mean, the eviction moratoriums are going to be lifted, the power company moratoriums on cutoffs are going to be lifted. I mean, we don't know when this is coming, but it's going to be very grim. And you had a lot of creative thoughts about what we can all try to do.
Well, it's clear that if you look at the aggregate gap in resources between what people have and what they need, that better personal financial management is part of the answer, but it's not going to be it's nowhere near enough. And long term, folks need better paying jobs and need better skills to get those jobs. That's very important, but that's a very long-term solution. In the interim, we really need public help. We need government help. We need a dedicated revenue stream from somewhere, similar to the streams that are helping small businesses, to make sure people get the food they need. Now, Montclair is fortunate because I believe there's a place people can get food if they're hungry almost or every night of the week. I mean, we're a very civic town. We have fantastic organizations, many of which you've listed in the chat. Just to take Tony's Kitchen as an example, they're amazing because they not only collect and distribute food, but they will bring food to an event that you hold if you are giving away food to people, and they'll do it almost no questions asked if you establish what you're doing. That is really rare. I mean, the amount of activity that's already surrounding this issue in this town is rare, but we need to integrate it better. We need one place where people can go to get information like that. And we need to do a better job at getting access to food for people who can't just show up and bring home a big box of food. Folks who are disabled or who don't drive or who just lack a connection to the information about stuff like this, either because they're not participating. Young people don't watch Channel 34, students, or people who are having a tough time getting information because they've never had to connect with social services before. I mean, this pandemic has taken all kinds of people who don't know what's available and plunged them into a situation where they desperately need what's available. And let me just say, I don't know if that's specific enough, but let me say one thing that's very specific and a little bit intemperate, which is this town has allowed a lack of quality, affordable supermarket food to be available in the 4th Ward for more than 5 years now. Pathmark was not a very good partner in charitable and community endeavors, but at least they were there. People shopped there, people sometimes lived there, people worked there, and you could prevail upon them sometimes to help out. That's all gone. It's been gone. And it's shocking. And we need our municipal government to work with supermarkets, including the incoming, whatever's incoming, to make sure that they're part of the solution. And also, this town has an enormous number of creative culinary creatives, restaurants and bars, not so many bars, a lot more restaurants. We need to help make them part of the awareness of this and part of working together on this. And, I think it has to be up there as a priority with the more visible pieces of recovery that are already in place, like help for small businesses and help for other areas that's being provided out of CARES Act money.
So Dale, thanks, Peter. I don't want to stop you, but the questions now are starting to pile up, and I promised I'd tell you when that happened. And part of that, I'm not sure if anybody can answer these, but part of it is what are, for using the students, what are they eligible for? Are they eligible to receive assistance like public different, food stamps and whatnot? So are you eligible for that when you're a student?
You can be eligible to get food stamps, but it's based on your income, which is your parents' income, but you can get, you can get subsidy.
So, but it would be based on your parents. So you'd have to be declared an independent if you were going to do it on your own. So the other question just sort of circled around in lots of different ways is, are universities addressing this? Are schools? Now, Gwen, do you know Montclair State, the movie suggested Montclair State had a food bank.
They do.
And how does that work? Go ahead, Dale.
No, they're called the, I'm forgetting what it's called, the red something.
Yeah, Red Hawk.
Red Hawk Pantry, yeah. And they have, of course, right now, because the students are not on campus,
Right.
the food bank, I don't think it's operating. But when they're there, I think that, gosh, I can't remember if it's open a couple of days a week.
It is. It was open a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, and they take donations, and they, the students used it with. I mean, there was more demand, I think, than there was food, because it was very well known. And I think one of the kids in the movie said that he and his friends had, I think it was like something like a hashtag free food, and whenever there was anything happening on campus where they were feeding you, they would just text free food and people would go there to eat. So I'm not laughing at the situation, but it just was the kind of ingenuity and unsinkable quality of these kids was just amazing. But it's more than any student or any person should have to handle. I just saw that one of the comments here was from somebody who is at Montclair State and is yes, and she said that maybe she could. Lauren,
I'm here.
thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Yes, I'm a faculty member at Montclair State. The Red Hawk Pantry is open. It has certain days and hours that it's open, and those are posted online. I believe actually they just moved to a new building, a new location. So
they needed more space. Yeah.
Yeah, and it used to be underground, and now it's at ground level, so that's good. In terms of food recovery, Dr. Ames, it's nice to meet you. I'm the faculty advisor of the Food Recovery Network.
Oh, so we did wonderful work with you.
Yes. Yeah. And so we've been able to recover hundreds of thousands of pounds, or tens of thousands of pounds of food.
You all are not giving it away anymore, though.
I know, because there's really not many.
Those were the good days.
I know, there's really not many locations on campus open for food purchasing anymore, and most of the food that is provided is made to order. So there's actually very little food waste going on. So there's the good and the bad that comes with that, of course.
We worked with you for about 3 years.
Yes, and I hope to continue as soon as we
looking forward to it.
Get back to our numbers on campus.
Lauren, you also wrote that food stamp eligibility is based on certain quality. How does that work for students?
It really depends on, I believe, if the student is a dependent of someone else or not, how many credits of schoolwork they're taking. It may also depend on their job, the number of hours that they work per week. We do have someone on our campus who can help, who's like trained in this area and who can help students apply for SNAP benefits to help them determine if they're eligible.
So one more question for you, Lauren. You were talking about food waste. There are a number of questions in the chat now about how do you recover food so it doesn't go to waste. What kinds of things were you doing? Maybe it was just before COVID, non-COVID times, but what kinds of things can be done?
It was non-COVID times, and we worked very closely with our food service provider. It is actually a completely student-run organization. It's a national organization with local chapters. It's called the Food Recovery Network. And we worked with Chartwells on campus to save whatever food was otherwise going to be thrown out. And it was perfectly edible food. And so they made sure that it was kept at the proper temperatures and labeled appropriately. They weighed everything.
Absolutely.
And we coordinated with MESH to make sure that that food was picked up and provided, again, being held at the proper temperatures and all of that.
Wow.
And
Dale,
that was the thing.
Lauren also pointed out, I didn't know this, thank you for telling us, that the food pantry at Montclair State is open now, and that there are about 3,500 students living on campus, even though most are remote, but 3,500 are there. So that pantry is still active and serving those students.
So Dale, I'm crowdsourcing from the chat, and it looks like we have somebody else with some expertise. Is Seth Salzman around somewhere? Seth put in, here you are. Seth, do you want to speak to your comment about why hunger and what kind of agency that is? Hi.
Wait a minute, there I am. Hi, guys. So I don't know if you've heard of us. We're called Why Hunger. This is the organization started in 1975 by Harry Chapin and Bill Ayers on the basic idea that food is a human right and that nobody should be hungry. So here we are, 2021, and the spotlight on hunger has never been brighter, sadly. We are not a food bank. We are not a food pantry, Why Hunger, but we administer programs for all sorts of different groups around the world. We're all about sustainable farming, community farms. But one of our key things that we have on our website is 1-800-FIND-FOOD, essentially. If you go to, I put the link on, but if you go to whyhunger.org and go to resources and go to find food, you put in your zip code, it will show you all of the food resources within 5, 10, 15 miles. Food banks, churches, synagogues, whatever it is that's linked into our network. You can also call the 800 line and we'll help you find food. We're very active right now. Back in the 70s, when Jimmy Carter was president, Harry Chapin was very successful in creating a commission on hunger. And of course, after Carter left office, the whole thing folded up and Reagan wasn't interested in it. But Biden is, and this administration is. So we're talking about getting a commission on hunger going again. And we're very active. And one of our advisory board members is Senator Leahy, who was involved with us in 1975, and he's still there. So we have a lot of hope that we can get hunger back on the front page of not just talking about it, but doing something about it. So I encourage you all, take a look at whyhunger.org. We had, to tell you how big the spotlight got, I don't know if any of you saw it, but we had a CBS special back in December, hosted by Kevin Bacon. And we raised about $6 million that night to go toward programming. So I encourage you, take a look at Why Hunger, take a look at the resources we have. And I'm glad to be on tonight, and I'm glad to hear this discussion, because we absolutely know that hunger on campus is just a tragedy that shouldn't be there.
Right.
So thank you for doing this tonight.
Thank you so much. And I also want to remind everyone that at the very beginning of the chat, there's a list of organizations that support families and students with hunger needs, and encourage anyone who can to support them.
And since Seth mentioned ideas that were in vogue in the 70s and then put into deep freeze for a long time, but are now coming back today, even more strongly than during the Obama administration, which did take place in this kind of shadow of wanting to keep government small. There's two initiatives that are happening right now as part of the budget battle that are the two biggest poverty fighting, especially among young people, tools. And that is that this administration has proposed making expanding in a pretty big way the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and making them refundable, which means if you were going to get a $3,000 tax credit, but you only made $1,000 in taxable income next year, you'd actually get $2,000 back from the government. And that has been resisted so strongly for so many years. But if these tax credits were refundable, that would come straight to people who are working or not working, but just don't make enough to get taxed. And that would be a huge help for food security. If you're a student who is working, you qualify for the EITC. If you don't have to be emancipated for your family to get, the family could still be living with your family and they could get the child tax credit. So if anyone out there is working in advocacy or just wants to call or write letters, the refundability of tax credits is a big thing that's on the table right now that would make a big dent in this problem.
Yeah, there was an article in the New York Times, was it today or yesterday, laying that out and the effect that would have on eliminating poverty, not eliminating it, but, drastically reducing it was striking. Just that one change. Or I think child poverty was the.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I think another thing is, I saw that one of the points that was made, and this is so true, is that the larger context of this, in addition to just the growing economic insecurity of working families in general, and how that is affecting their kids who are trying to get a higher education, there's also the drastic cutback in state money going to public universities and federal money going to states for higher education. And I think that there's been overall nationally since the recession a 50% cut in the government support to public universities. And so you can imagine, that this was drastically cut during the recession, but it hasn't come back to the degree that it existed before. And so universities have been raising tuition because where are they going to get the money? And that's a huge part of the crisis with, kids having to go into such, just crushing debt to get an education, and then having to work extra jobs and, ultimately skip meals to make ends meet.
Dale, can I make a comment about that? I actually was the one who put that in the chat. So I'm also at Montclair State. I'm a professor there. And right now, the state provides only perhaps 15 to 18% of the budget for Montclair State. It has dropped incredibly. I mean, it's a state institution. People probably think that at least it's at least half supported by the state, but it's not. It's around 15 to 18%. Tuition has been going up 8% every year. So that's why, you noticed in the film, it's over 30,000 now for in-state students to attend Montclair State. Many of them work multiple jobs, and it's been exacerbated by the pandemic because many of them are the only earner in their family because their parents have lost jobs. Many Montclair State students have parents who are undocumented. And so it really is a problem, and it's a catch-22 because they need to live with their parents. They may be the only ones who are earning some money, and then they aren't eligible for other supports because they're living with their parents. So there's really, it's a very large, multiply complicated problem here. I mean, we can do things to address food and providing food, but there's a larger context about what is underpinning what students are going through to support themselves and to eat and to find places to live and such.
Yeah, that's why I think that the college students' food insecurity is just the tip of the iceberg of a true, social crisis. I mean, it's not like it didn't exist before, but it's at such a level now with COVID on top of it that it's hard to really get your head around it. So,
If you don't invest in that, the consequences are terrible because hungry students don't perform well. So even if you look at this in a kind of hard-headed bang for the buck analysis kind of way, this underinvestment is leading ultimately to leaving kids hungry, which is going to lead to underperformance at the colleges they're spending more and more money at.
right, and that's what they pointed out, that the dropout rates are, are high. So the kids have the debt from having tried to go to college, but they don't have the degree that can help them get a job that can help them pay off the debts. So it's such a cycle, and I kind of find myself feeling just so daunted in trying to think about what do we all do about this.
Well, I think I think Montclair State is often very disconnected from other things that go on in Montclair. And I feel like the beginnings of whatever answers are out there could maybe come if Montclair State students, representatives, somebody was more involved in municipal discussions, which so often revolve around the lower, the rest of town, basically, right? I mean, we don't hear a lot of discussions about cooperation with or learning from or working with Montclair State too often. And
right. It almost feels like we should, that those students should be part of our community, right? That we think of them as neighbors and see if we can help in some way. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say there's a very interesting comment about the fact that, and came from Eileen, we've recognized the impact of lack of food on younger kids, where you have free lunches and breakfasts in the schools and free or reduced lunches. Maybe, as Eileen says, this needs to age up with the students because we don't recognize it in the older kids, but their kids as well. What's interesting in the chat, Dale, just as I'm watching this, is there, we keep pivoting from local responses. Somebody said their synagogue is looking to get gift cards for the hungry to go to a restaurant. So we go from a very local response, would that work, to then the advocacy response of who should we talk to? How do you get the government involvement? So it's interesting to watch how this pivots back and forth from local agencies to a much larger government response. And maybe it's time to do some of that as well.
I was going to say this is only a small piece. It doesn't speak to the larger issue, but in the film, one thing that was really striking is that, universities in their scramble to make up for the government money they've lost have been profiting a lot from the food services, that there are, the food services on college campuses make a huge profit. And one of the points that was made was that it's so profitable that these food service companies in some cases have built large facilities on campus, just as they donate them, but they're using the money, they're making so much money that they can donate huge buildings to the campuses without hurting their bottom line too much. And universities are thrilled to have these buildings. They can't afford to build them themselves. So it just feels like, this problem of not, as a country, funding our higher education institutions enough has created all of this unhealthy dependence on things that ultimately are taking it off the backs of the kids.
Right. And we're allowing the private industry like food service to own, buy, and pay whatever they want with their profits versus government intervention here. So Anne Lapel put in, she went to a free university, as did I. I paid no tuition at all when I went to the city university. There, you know, so there were kids who were hungry, but we were paying $17 a semester. But our response was, when we get this degree, we will pay it back in taxes. And that was always, you know, our position, no tuition, you'll get it in our taxes. And in fact, that's true.
Mhm.
And in fact, that's true if we could only have a longer view on this. So Dale, we have about 10 more minutes. How would we like to get some of the final comments in?
Yeah, I would love for Gwen and Peter to just, I know that you touched on this before, but just to talk to us about what we as citizens of this community can be doing to try to help this situation, because it's kind of like, I feel so overwhelmed talking about it. You know, we need to get the federal government to spend more on education, to spend more on food for families. But what do you think we should be doing? I guess we'll start with Gwen and then Peter.
Well, I am really happy about the way that our Mesh partners have really stood by Mesh. And when the virus came, and we couldn't go into our churches and synagogues, you all pressed forward, and we made a way with our grab and go, and our numbers increased tremendously when we started doing grab and go. We went from 25, 30 to over 40 people that we meet feed every evening. So you all have really stood by, and just recently the township thought about that we have people who are not only hungry during the day, but they also are cold. And so we have come together as partners. Tony's Kitchen and Mesh have come together, and we have a drop-in center where they're there from 10 to 7. And so Mesh serves them food. We're social distancing and making sure that everything is healthy to be around. But I have to say, Montclair is very open to the food insecure. I've seen that they, the churches and the synagogues and all the houses of faith have just been wonderful to Mesh over these years. We could not be successful without the contributions of the different houses of faith. And they are still standing, even though we are not necessarily going, we're only going into Christ Church has opened up now and is serving inside their facility. Union Baptist has also have agreed to serve inside the building, and we do interval dining. Like you have so many minutes to eat, and then another group comes in. So gradually, I'm hoping this virus will terminate, and I don't think it ever is going to be the same, but I really hope that the people who are homeless and food insecure will continue to find ways to eat healthy. And I think we really have joined hands, particularly on this township initiative of drop-in center. We really are working together. Tony's Kitchen and Mesh and the Unitarian Church and Union Baptist are working together to let them not only have a place to sit down and eat for 30 minutes, but also to get out of the cold as well. So we're making a step, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
Great. And Peter, what do you recommend?
So there are studies that show that once you look somebody in the eye, it's much harder to turn down their request if they're looking for any assistance or help. It makes a big, big difference to the people looking for help if you can establish any kind of personal connection with anybody. So my first recommendation is always to volunteer somewhere that helps if you haven't already, because once you do, it'll be your life that changes as much as anybody that you are out to help. And then you'll feel like spreading the word, and it makes it easier to fight the fatigue that comes with how enormous a task this is. Because the second thing I would say is, don't be satisfied to get back to normal. We can't just count on the pandemic ending and rest there, because this was a serious issue before, and there are new problems that are going to outlast the pandemic. And then I would say, advocate locally. the town council and our local leaders listen to people who make noise. Some of you may know this in a positive way or a negative way. If this town council can spend an entire session debating leaf blowers, then we can find time to figure out how to make Montclair State better neighbors with us and how to provide stronger, dedicated support for drop-in centers and for getting information out about where people can get help. And then this is going to sound negative, but it's not. My last piece of advice is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are so many people in Montclair who want to go out and do something, and their answer is to start a new family foundation or a new nonprofit with their great idea, because we're full of creative people. But there are tons of organizations out there that are doing great work and hard work, and you don't have to learn everything they know to help. We just have to figure out better ways to bring them together. The one optimistic thing about this whole issue is it is not a supply problem. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody who's hungry. So just think about that. That's impressive. It's actually great. It makes the challenge connecting and integrating, providing access. We don't have to find a way to double our crop yields. I mean, that would be a real problem, for real. So, you know, be optimistic about that and figure out how to connect people.
Great. I want to thank Gwen and Peter so much for taking part in this. I think it just was invaluable, and I hope we can all stay in touch with you and take advantage of what you've told us. This is really terrific.
And Dale, should we say we're going to meet everybody at the town council meeting?
Yeah. We'll
Peter,
all be just
we're
like
going to follow you.
Well, we'll see you in your traditional squares at the town council meeting.
So thank you all for coming. I think with that, unless there's a last, there's so many notes in here that, you know, every piece of our social structure has to come together to make this work. And if you look at the notes, it covers everything from colleges to libraries to restaurants to how do we bring people together in safe places. So thank you all for your notes. Before you all leave, I suggest you read some of the comments because I'm not going to be able to read them all because they are great observations.
And please do check again the links to organizations that could really use our support. They're in the chat from the beginning. They're all throughout the chat. So
any other further goodbyes? And with that, there will be another at Nourish at the end of March. It'll be on a very different topic. It will be on adoptions, which has its own challenges. So the information.
I just ask if people are interested in pursuing this among the different religious communities they're in Montclair. Is there a way that we can have a place if people wanted to follow up after this where they could channel into the Social Action Committee here and we can get somebody together if we wanted to pursue it any further?
So what would that look like, Linda? That's wonderful. I mean, I'm looking at the comments. There are a lot of people who have some passion around
I
this.
was just talking about, we have a Social Action Committee. I know most of the other places in town have committees that are trying to do right by our citizens who are in need. So I guess if we wanted to continue brainstorming together, that would be a possibility. You can contact me. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, or work through. Yes. Okay. We're gonna make.
Shall we put your email in the chat?
Oh, great.
Your email is in the flyer, Linda. Everyone knows how to reach you.
No, okay. So anyway, I know that we're energized and there are a lot of ideas. We've been working on these questions for a while, and I think that we were hoping to get some energy going. So rather than it just stop with this wonderful presentation, if other people want to talk about it, you can contact me. As the representative of the Food Insecurity Subcommittee of the Social Action Committee of Shomrei. Okay.
All right. And with that, thank you, Linda. Thank you to the committee that put all of this together, Eileen, Sarita, Ann, you're all around here somewhere. Audrey, Dale, for your,
Lynn Kurzweil.
Lynn Carswell.
oh, Lynn. I thought I
Did you
said
mention,
Hi,
did you
Lynn.
mention Eileen,
I did
Yes.
say that.
Ann LaPel?
Yes.
Ann, thank you. I did. And I want to thank Dale, of course, for managing our discussion here. Linda for volunteering, and to Gwen and to Peter, many thanks for your insights and offering us some, I hate to say this, food for thought.
Boy.
Thank you. We really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Much. You
Good
too.
night.
Thank you all.
Bye.